everybody on the movie is working for the director. They're the only person really who can answer a lot of the questions that you have. I've often said it, grading is a little bit like being a tailor. I can make you a great suit, you just need to tell me whether you want a blue suit or a grey suit. It's not that a grey suit isn't better than a blue suit, but let me know what kind of suit you want.
On this episode of the Colorist Podcast, I talk with Adam Inglis, colorist for feature films, Sherlock Holmes, Alien vs. Predator, and Mr. Turner. Adam was one of the first users of Baselight when it was previously known as Film Grader. It was used internally at CFC in London when finishing the claymation feature Chicken Run. Currently, his work can be seen on the BBC documentary series Planet Earth II.Shot with several different cameras in only natural light. The show puts the viewer in amazing landscapes with vibrant colored animals. On this episode, we talk about his editorial background and getting his start at the computer film company, comparing working at a facility, starting your own shop, and working freelance, the challenges of working on nature documentaries, and the advantages of ACES and color-managed workflows. And now, here's Adam Inglis. Thanks, Adam, for joining me on the podcast. I appreciate you making the time, and thanks for coming on.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So what's your background, and how did you end up becoming a colorist?
Well, complete accident, really. My original intention was to be an editor. So I got myself a job straight out of college as a sort of avid assistant. And it wasn't really where I wanted to be. I wanted to be working in movies, and I was working in TV, and not great TV at that. So I got a job over at the computer film company as a digital lab operator, where we were scanning and recording film back in the sort of, wasn't even early days of DI, it was more for the visual effects arm. And out of that, they were developing DI processes. So they had developed a grading system in-house by people who then went off and left computer film company to form Filmlight. And they had their own in-house homemade grading system called, at the time, just the Film Grader, which was developed specifically for Chicken Run, so that they could fix all the kind of little issues they were having with animation and matching lights up with doing the stop motion. So they had developed this tool specifically for that, and then started finding that they were using it to sort of balance out visual effects plates. And then we started expanding it from there. Sometimes then we got whole sequences which needed a lot of optical work or other stuff done digitally. And then they made the Grader 2. Grader 2 was super exciting because that actually had shapes and all these other things. And that's where we started getting into doing small sequences like day for night sequences and stuff like that. And because I had an editing background, I was brought in to sort of do a lot of the conform stuff to help out Adam Glasman at the time, who was their colorist. And so it sort of built from there, really. We started doing sequences, and then we did whole movies, and got to the stage where I was pretty much grading stuff because I knew how to work gear.
Yeah, it's really interesting, too, because people don't really think of animation or stop motion as being something that they intensely color correct. So it's interesting that that's where the origins come from.
Well, yeah, certainly for the origins on that side, I think obviously other people were developing systems for other similar reasons. But it was the sort of the early days of digital post-production, of people realizing what you could do with it. And they're sort of building it from there.
So did your editorial background, did that change how you approach grading?
I don't know whether it is. I mean, I know I certainly think a lot about how the shot might be developing and how that might have been cut. So you know that, well, if this angle here comes back and that's tracking backwards, and then we cut to another angle and then we cut back to that same shot from before, you know you can put the same grade on it. Maybe from that side of things. I was never a film editor. I was just something that I wanted to do. I don't think I was sufficiently deep in editing really for it to change my mentality. I think my sort of professional outlook really developed out of pure grading, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. There's really three ways to work as a colorist. Either you work at a facility, you start your own shop, or you work as freelance.
If you're going to compare, say, freelance to starting up your own shop, because both of those have the advantage that you are effectively your own boss, and you have a business of your own that you can say, this is mine and this is what I built and so forth. The big advantage of being completely freelance is you have no overheads. The problem with having your own facility and lots of very expensive gear and rent and all that other stuff is you've got to pay for that. But as a pure freelancer, it's pretty much all profit. So from a business point of view, that's a good thing. The drawback, obviously, is then, I might have people like call me up and say, can you grade my movie? And it's like, well, yeah, sure, just go and find yourself a facility. I can't generate my own work in the same way that you could as running a facility. And then if you want to work for a facility, obviously the big advantage there is you can get paid a lot more. You can, you get all your extra benefits of pension schemes and regular salary and all that other kind of stuff. If you look at a facility, you tend to be often doing that facility's speciality. So if you're working at Company 3, you're going to be doing kind of big Hollywood movies.
Yeah. In the past, I think that there are colorists that were either a commercials person or a episodic person, or do you find that that's kind of changed?
To a certain extent, I think that still exists. I'm not known in the commercials world at all. They have no idea who I am. So I think I've graded about 4 commercials in my entire career. I mean, a lot of it is about the people that know you, because so much of it is about those personal contacts and people that know you. And I think a lot of it's about trust. And they say, oh, well, I think certainly the distinction between television and films seems to have narrowed quite a lot, especially since, if you think about it, the way we consume those things is largely the same now. I mean, people don't really go to the cinema very much, and they also don't watch television. They just stream it. So they go on Netflix, and that's where you get all your content from, is via the same era, whether you're watching a film or watching a TV show. But no one goes on Netflix to watch a commercial. So maybe there's still a divide there, that the commercial world is quite separate.
Yeah, they go to Netflix to avoid the commercial.
Yes, exactly.
So when you were coming up as a freelancer, before you had all of these contacts, was there anything that you did to improve your chances to get booked?
Well, I didn't really go straight in as a freelancer because I was staff for quite a while. I was staff at, Computer Film Company turned into Framestore CFC. And then I left Framestore and went to work at Deluxe for a bit. And then after Deluxe, then I went freelance. So I'd already got a fairly hefty credit list already by the time I went out freelancing. And the other thing I had with going freelance is that at the point that Deluxe at the time decided to close down their DI operation in London, we already had Sherlock Holmes 1 ready to go. And I was attached to it. So that then Technicolor picked that up, but I was still attached as a colorist. So I already had a freelance job in the bag. So that helped quite a lot.
So in that situation, I'm assuming the directors and the DPs, they were really married to the idea that you were the colorist on their projects moving forward.
Well, I had already done tests and so forth with them, and we had already had a lot of those discussions. And so they kept me on board, which was great.
When you do work with directors and DPs, do they really change the way that you grade depending on what director or DP that you work with?
Well, I don't think they change the way you grade as regards to what tools you use or how you use them, but certainly artistically, that's going to change because really, ultimately, everybody on the movie is working for the director. They're the only person really who can answer a lot of the questions that you have. I've often said it, grading is a little bit like being a tailor. I can make you a great suit. You just need to tell me whether you want a blue suit or a grey suit. It's not that a grey suit isn't better than a blue suit, but let me know what kind of suit you want. So I don't think it's possible to grade just on my own. I can't do it. I need to have somebody who tells me what the movie's about, what they're trying to do, where we're going with the story, what are we trying to convey with this scene or that scene. That changes a lot depending on what kind of movie they're making.
So you've also done several projects too that draw on nature. They're obviously all lit with only natural light. And is there something different about how you use those projects? Because they're not deliberate. It's kind of like they just get what they get. And because you've worked on Planet Earth II, which I think is amazing, which is a great looking show, and really curious about how you approach that.
There's a couple of things there. Firstly, one of the very basic things you're doing with a show like that is you've got to make it all seamless. So you have, like I said, there's uncontrolled lighting, and so continuity is a lot more challenging than if someone's actually set the lights up correctly. So that's just hard work. And what I tend to do on those shows is I'll have a sort of a quick chat with a producer about what we're trying to do, and then they just have to leave me to it for a little bit as I just get it so that everything matches together. Because it's not just different light, there's different cameras. They're shooting like everything. They're shooting the Phantom, they're shooting Alexa, they're shooting F-55, they're shooting old archive material. Everything is getting stuck together. So you've got to match all those as well. Once you've gone beyond that, then you're into the sense that a lot of this nature stuff is kind of very pure filmmaking. It's all about images and juxtaposing images to tell stories. There's not really the same way you might have with drama, which is about, actors and dialogue and that kind of thing. So it's about getting these pictures to have the impact to tell the story in a much further way. So I've found that we can often push this stuff a lot more than you might necessarily want to do in a regular drama, just because the sense of big, sweeping vistas and landscapes and stuff like that requires your brain wants to see a bit more there, if that makes sense. And also because you have no people in it, we can get away with a lot more because your brain is so sensitive to skin tone being off that you can immediately see if a grade looks weird by looking at the characters. But then in a wildlife film, we aren't as sensitive to what a cheetah looks like. We aren't as sensitive to what a parrot looks like. So you can kind of cook them up a little bit more. And to us, it just looks like better.
Yeah, the most brilliant thing, too, that I noticed in there was I felt myself treating these animals like characters. Like I'm yelling at the screen, "You've got to run, lizard. You've got to get away from all these snakes." And you go, wait a second, these aren't actors. And so you're really injecting a lot of emotion into the whole situation, whether it's editorially or with the color or with the music. But on all front, when they all work together, you get this amazing result. And it's real.
Yeah, it's real filmmaking as well. That's how they're getting that emotional response is, not by sitting down and having planned out the scene. It's putting it together with using filmmaking techniques.
Yeah. So you were mentioning, too, that you had to match all of these cameras together, and there's things built into, say, Baselight or Resolve or anything that you use that's a color-managed workflow like ACES or True Light. Did that actually help in this situation?
Yes. ACES is great. Well, and True Light is great. But the great thing about ACES really is it's a standard. I don't have to go into a facility now and try and say, okay, what LUTs have you got? Let's see if we can find something. And okay, let's make everything log C. You have this one standard which everything is going to sit into, which is very useful. So going back to my sort of film background, that when we were scanning negative, then we would, you'd take your base density scan and you'd know exactly what your material was and exactly what your negative was as your start point. And with ACES, we're getting that same sort of thing now, that you're not trying to work out how has someone debated this. Are we talking, are we in red gamma 4 or red log film or what, which way around? You've just got it's coming in ACES linear, and that's great. So what I've got to work with is what's coming straight off the camera.
There are colorists who say that it takes some getting used to grade in ACES. Did you feel that as well?
No, because it made complete sense to, again, the old film background. If you'd work on log scans, you'd put that through a print emulation LUT, which was you could never get away from because you were going out to print. So grading below that one fixed output transform was kind of second nature to me, really. And I think that's what I quite like about it, is it seems to be following on from those old film days.
So you've also worked on a lot of different grading systems, Baselight, Resolve, Nucoda. Do you feel like there's any situations where one system is clearly a better choice than the other?
Well, I think the thing with grading systems is you'll often talk to people and they'll say, oh, I absolutely love such and such a system. And they say, oh, really? Have you worked on this? What do you think of that one? And they go, oh, no, I've never used that. Everyone thinks that the system that they have is the best one. And I sort of think about it a little bit like your first language, that you might start off by speaking English and then you can learn French. So in my respect, I started off with Baselight. So Baselight to me is second nature. And then I had to sort of learn the other systems from the back of that. So I'm very biased to Baselight. I think it's an incredible system, mainly because the way my brain works with grading is the way that Baselight works, because that's how I learned how to do it. And we were effectively beta testing it back in the really early days. So I've sort of grown with it. Whether they're any better, it's just a tool. And there are things that annoy me about a lot of the systems, but, you are getting into that bad workman blames his tools situation. They pretty much all do the same thing now.
Right, and now that they actually have, like you're saying, these standards too, they should all perform the same.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of things that, with the Baselight that I do like about it is that I particularly like the fact that it doesn't make you grade in a certain way, that you can, it's very modular and a little bit like a Meccano set, that you can mix and match whichever bits you want to use, whereas a lot of the other systems assume you are going to grade in a certain manner and a certain workflow, which kind of irritates me a little bit. I don't want to grade like that. I want to do this. And they're basically just, yeah, you can. If you want to grade this way, you can. If you want to do it this way, you can.
Yeah, the best digital tool is the one that kind of gets out of your way.
Yeah.
It was interesting, too, because I saw this one quote that you had that said, there's no need to mess about with 967 windows and keys and curves. Less is more, which I really passionately agree with, too. But there are other films like, say, The Revenant, that takes the idea in the opposite direction, where they choose to roto out individual strands of hair just so they can grade somebody's face independently. Do you feel like there's a place for both styles, or do you feel like there's certain situations where one is better than the other?
Well, I don't think they're mutually exclusive at all.
Oh, okay.
The Revenant was a very subtle and precise piece of work. And I think it actually is completely fitting in with my philosophy on how grading should be done. Because they weren't just throwing stuff at the screen, trying to make it work. There was a very sort of sense of precision about, right, we have to do this, this, and this, and that's what we need to do. It wasn't an overgraded piece. So I think that's kind of what I'm really talking about, is the more things you start layering up, if you don't really need to be doing those things, you don't really know why you're doing them. So, for example, there's no point starting to pull a key on the face and rotate the face up and make that brighter if you haven't got your basic exposure level correct.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying now, because when you start coloring and you have all these tools, you tend to just overuse a bunch of them.
Yeah, it's a little bit like if you're cooking, you don't want to throw every one of your herbs and spices that you have in your cupboard. It's a case of, okay, sometimes you're going to need to use quite a lot of ingredients, other times you don't, but you don't want to just throw everything in there.
When you worked with what you started way back when the actual Baselight was just starting, as you were saying, it was basically beta testing it. And when you started it, did you use a panel, or do you prefer a specific panel?
No, I don't really use panels. The early days of the Baselight, we never had a panel. The blackboard just didn't exist. So I got very used to using mouse and keyboard on that. Then I moved from the Baselight onto the Luster. I tried to use the Luster panel for about half a day and then had it removed from the room and went back to mouse and keyboard, and that was fine for everything I was doing there. So I tend to not really use a panel. Sometimes you kind of have to after a while. Sometimes if you're doing video grading, for example, you need to have a set of trackballs. Yeah, no, I'm not a massive panel fan.
So you're more of a points, like printer points kind of person, or?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I'm printer points all the way. Although the new film like grading, was it base grade? I think it might be called, the new thing they've got coming out. That sounds very interesting. But right now I'm printer points on log material. But then if you're grading actual video, then you got to use LibGam again. That's what it's about, using the tool that's designed for that. Printer points was designed to be used on log material underneath a LUT, and LibGam again is designed to be used on linear material. So if some of the earlier wildlife movies, which we weren't grading through ACES or anything like that, that was LibGam again. That's the best way of doing it.
You said that you started off with films, but do you feel like your style of grading for TV is different than how you grade films?
Not really, especially not nowadays. So if we're going to talk about drama, TV drama now is shot on the same cameras and cut exactly the same as feature films are. One of the big differences, obviously, is you don't get as much time on TV drama than you do on a feature film, because a TV drama, they're often asking you to do an hour's worth of TV in 2 days, which would be like doing a feature film in 3. So there's that. Also, the other thing, actually, is sometimes you're going to have a bit more work to be doing on TV drama because they don't have the budget or the time on set. So you actually have more stuff you might need to be doing in the grade. So not really, and certainly in regards to drama, the wildlife stuff I think is sort of a separate thing. But then I don't think I would grade the wildlife TV stuff differently from how I grade the wildlife feature stuff I do. Obviously, one of the big differences between TV and film is that film is very much a director's medium and TV is very much a sort of producer's medium. So you might often have a TV show which has different directors for different episodes and different DOPs as well. So with that, the unifying vision is producers, and often you have more than one of them, and you've got to get the grade approved by your producers that you're directly working with, and that the network might want to have a look and so forth. Whereas with feature films, there's often, if your director walks in and says, I like it, then that's pretty much what you're doing. Or if he says, I hate it, then you have to change it. So there's a little bit of a political difference, but artistically, I don't think so, no.
Do you find that because film is really like a reflected screen, a huge screen, and TV is a small, backlit screen, is there anything that you consider different, like how brightening images change or anything like that?
Well, ultimately, once you're grading your master grade for cinema, then that's going to still end up, you're going to have to still make a video version of that, which is going to have to fulfill the same artistic intent. I mean, I'm a big believer in grading for your primary delivery. So if you're grading a cinema film, which is intended to be seen at the cinema, even if it's a fairly small movie, which might not be seen by a lot of people in the cinema, still that's what you should grade for. You should grade on a projector. And similarly, if you're grading a TV show, then that should be graded on a monitor, because that's its primary delivery thing. And then you might do a trim pass for either of the other two mediums. But whilst obviously there is a perceptual difference, I don't have a conscious, I always do this for TV or I always do that for film. It's, you just make it work for the particular medium you're grading towards as your primary delivery, and then everything else, you kind of got to pick one or the other. You can't do the grade twice.
So are there any colorist work that you really admire?
I suppose I should say Adam Glasman, because he taught me everything I know.
What about his work do you really like?
It's that sort of respect for film, which I think comes through. He used to work and run his own photo lab, I think. There's a subtlety to it, which is always what I think I look for when I'm seeing other colorists work, is seeing that elegance.
Recently, let's say, systems like Resolve came out and they were less expensive to purchase. Do you think that having a system available for colorists is a good or bad thing for the industry?
Having it available, possibly a good thing, but I think the bigger picture, it's quite bad, because these systems need some very smart people to make them, and very smart people are expensive. And so my concern is that if the price point comes down to a level where developers can't afford to make tools anymore, then we'll be very much disadvantaged as colorists.
Yeah, I agree. We're at a time when having a colorist on a film or project is a really essential part. As you were saying, the budget's getting reduced. We're being asked to do more and more.
But I think, my big concern is about the people developing the software, rather than, if people out there want to grade your movie for 50 quid, that's fine. Off you go and do it. But yeah, it's the software developing people. I wouldn't want to get it to a stage where, because the thing is, there is not the volume of consumers out there to make it viable that you could make this equipment and sell it to so many people at a very low price point. You kind of, systems like the Baselight need to be expensive premium product, because they don't sell that many units in comparison to a MacBook Pro. So my concern is that if the price point of these systems comes down, they have to keep reducing the price of the systems to remain competitive, then the only way they're going to be able to do that is by just not developing them so much, which is not a good thing for us.
And, with these systems and the software being updated, and just a request that we have in the room, say on something like Mad Max, where they're doing a lot of sky replacements right in color, we're being asked to do more and more where, sometimes our role is not necessarily as a colorist, but as a finisher. Are you asked to do a lot of those things too, or do you just do straight color?
No, when they certainly on one of the things that is great about the Baselight is that you have so much firepower available that you can do a lot of visual effects stuff. And there's a lot of time we might have something that we're trying to do, and the quickest way to do it is actually to effectively do some visual effects in the Baselight rather than pull that out, send that off to someone who does it in smoke, bring it back in. The director goes, oh no, it's not quite what I want. You can very quickly do that stuff, and it's done, and it's off the table, and no one has to worry about it anymore. And also sometimes it helps you out from a grading point of view, that you might have a shot which is looking particularly dull, and well, the reason it's looking dull is because we've got a really super horrible cloudy sky. Let's just grab the sky from this other shot, whack in, done. Now suddenly the shot looks a lot nicer. I mean, I don't consider myself to be a visual effects artist. I'm not trained as one, so there often will be stuff that you can kick back, but it's an extra tool that we can do. It's quite difficult to do any of those sort of compositing things in all the other systems. Well, I haven't really explored the Mystica too much. I think that is quite powerful on compositing stuff, but you don't really want to get into compositing in a Resolve, for example. So that is very much send that off to visual effects and get them to do it, and then we can spend our time in the room doing just color.
Well, thanks, Adam, for joining me. I really appreciate you making the time to come onto the podcast.
No problem.
So if anybody wants to contact you or see your work, where would they find you?
I'm sort of around online places. I think my CV is up on the Filmlight freelance register. It's got my email address on it. Then I'm also on LinkedIn and other things like that. So I'm sort of around on the internet.
Cool. Well, thanks again.
No problem.